So hello everyone, and welcome to my talk Rolling in the Deep Link, where we will be taking a deep dive into Flutter navigation. My name is Alicja Ogonowska and I come from Poland. I've been working as a mobile app developer for over 8 years now. I started as a native Android developer and then I moved to Flutter 4 years ago, never regretting the change. So I work for a Polish company named Equico. And if you ever want to reach out to me, you can find me on, I think, almost any social media platform. I usually just use my name and my surname. And one note, everything that I will be showing you, the code, the articles, etc., I will share it at the end, so you will get all resources. And I am also a member of Flutteristas, and this is a community of female and non-binary Flutter enthusiasts. So if you want to join us, feel free to do so by registering on the flutteristas.org. And on the 11th November this year, we will be streaming a Flutterista conference. It will be available as a YouTube stream, so feel free to join us and enjoy the knowledge. And in today's talk, I will tell you what are deep links and why are they important. Then I will guide you through Android and iOS native setup. I will show you how to implement deep linking in Flutter, mention some third-party SDKs, and then we'll be wrapping it up. So what is deep linking? This is a technique of opening an application to a specific page from an external source. And this external source can be any kind of link, like a link on a web page, a link in an email, push notification, text message, or even in another app. There are some common use cases where implementing deep links is crucial. For example, if you have an e-commerce app and your users get a link to a product, if they click on the link, surely they want to see the exact product and not your app's main page. So if we say about sharing, any kind of app that allows the users to share content like social media apps, news apps, articles, etc., those kinds of apps definitely should implement deep linking so that users can be taken directly to the content that interests them. And also, if you plan to be advertising your app, surely you should take care of making it possible for the user to come directly to the content that is tailored for their needs. But basically, I think it's always good practice to provide this feature. And you may ask yourself, okay, but why is it so important? In worst case, the app will just open, on the main page, or the mobile browser will open. But the problem is users are lazy and they are very easily distracted. So if they click on a link and it doesn't open what they expect to get, they will just get bored, forget what they were trying to get. They will leave the app. You are losing your potential client. So by providing them a simplified navigation, we are improving their user experience. And happy users are more engaged users. Their retention is better. And with that, also your marketing efforts will be better because the money you spend on advertisement is more likely to convert and earn you some money. So also with that, with deep linking, you are able to track your users and know where they are coming from. And based on that, you can also customize their experience. For example, this campaign brought me this user and they clicked on the link because they showed, a perfume. So now let's show them best deals for perfumes as a start. Let's first understand what a deep link looks like. So each link consists of a scheme, host, and a path. And this is also a link that consists of a scheme, host, and a path. So just keep in mind that a scheme is not only HTTP or HTTPS, but it can also be a custom scheme. And more generally, you can also have a port, which is not widely used when you are using deep links, some query parameters, and also a fragment that is marked by the hash. And this means a specific section of a web page. And we can divide deep links into two types based on the scheme. So first type is custom scheme, and in Android they are called deep links. So sometimes the naming is a bit confusing. While on iOS they are called custom URL schemes, and they are quite easy to set up because you can use everything as your scheme. It can be app, DroidCon, whatever. Actually, it can be whatever. It's good if you want to do it just for testing, or you don't have a domain that you need to match. But the problem is that if a user clicks on such a link and they don't have the app installed, it results in an error because the system doesn't know which app to open. So it's not a very good user experience, and also it's not secure because actually any app can claim the same custom scheme and try to open your links. So the actual recommended solution is to use HTTP or even better HTTPS URL schemes, and those in Android are called app links, and in iOS it's universal links. So it provides a seamless experience because if users don't have your app installed, it will just open a website, so not that bad. And it's also secure because this also requires a verification on your server. So for Android, we are starting the implementation in the Android manifest file, where you need to add an intent filter to your activity tag, where you specify an action of named view that is browsable and default. And you also need to define the scheme that you want to use. So yeah, whether it's an HTTPS or your scheme, you need to define it here. And you also need to provide your host, which is actually your domain. And then you also get some data tags that will define the paths. So if you don't put any, then by default all paths of your domain will be opened in that application. But you can use the path tag to define an exact path that needs to be matched in order to open the application. There are also some more flexible tags like path patterns. So for example, you define that the path should have a slash and something, or a recipe slash something, maybe a recipe name or recipe ID, or the last example is just any path that has a slash and ends with a .html. There are also some other data tags like path prefix, which defines how exactly the path should start, and two quite new tags added in API level 31. It's path suffix and path advanced pattern that provides a regex-like pattern, but I won't be explaining them in details. If you want to get to know them, check the docs. But someone once said, if you have a problem and try to solve it with a regex, you may end up having two problems. And it's actually not a real regex, it's regex-like, and it's available since API 31, and you know how Android updates work. Probably like 5% of your users will be eligible to use that, so yeah, just forget about it. Then when it comes to server verification, you need to host a special file named assetlinks.json, and it needs to be publicly available on your domain in the well-known folder. And this file basically looks like this. All you need to change is the package name and use your signed app's fingerprint. So you can either generate it using the command line key tool, or if you are signing your app with Google Play Store, then you can find it in the console, in the app integrity section. And speaking of Google Play Console, they also have a section for deep links. So if you have already a published app, you can check in there if there are any errors. My setup is perfect, so sadly I couldn't show an example of errors. It's all green, but yeah, remember that there is such option. In iOS, the setup is started by adding a associated domain. So you add it as an capability in the runner, signing and capabilities. And it always has a format of applinks, your domain.com. And if you want to use a custom scheme, you also need to define it in Xcode. You do it in the info.plist file. And one note, if you are not using custom schemes, just HTTP, no need to do that. And that is it when it comes to Xcode work. On iOS, the rest of the setup is happening on the server. So you also need to host a special file. It's called Apple AppSite Association file. And fun fact, it's also a JSON, but you don't put the JSON extension to it. And in there, you also need to provide your app ID, which consists of your team ID and app's bundle ID, and also define the paths that you want to support. And the cool thing about iOS is because they do the path setup on the server, and it must be publicly available. Actually, you can check any app that has a domain and a mobile application and check their setup. So I'm also kind of a curious George, so I checked how Twitter is doing. And for example, you can notice that they have a lot of nuts. So on iOS, it is possible to exclude some paths. And this is actually a common approach that you specify some paths directly, then you exclude the paths that you don't want to trigger opening your app. And then in the end, you just accept all paths. And a note, you cannot do that on Android. So for iOS, it's also possible to use a question mark to match any character. The file size must not exceed 128 kilobytes. It may sound a lot, but if your URL structure is not very well thought through, trust me, it is possible to exceed this amount. So a small hacky solution for me, if you remove the JSON formatting, the file looks bad, but it works because the Apple bots are still accepting it. So, but the better solution is to improve your URLs, but let's face it, sometimes it's out of developers' reach. And also the file must be publicly available, so if you have any problems, then make sure that your website isn't blocking Apple bots. And iOS has one more cool feature, and it's called Smart App Banners, and it allows you to display a banner on your website that will prompt the users to either open the link directly in the app if they have it installed, or open the App Store, and it's actually added by one line of code. When it comes to testing, you can just click on the link, or if you like to play with the console or want to test the custom schemes, you can use ADB on Android and developer tools command lines on iOS. And if you ever see such a dialog while testing your deep links, this is the so-called disambiguation dialog. It appears on Android, and it means that you almost did it right, but something is wrong. So basically, your server doesn't fully verify your app, and definitely you need to check if, for example, the fingerprint matches. So things that you need to keep in mind is that we are making a Flutter app, but for deep links there are setup that needs to be done natively, and there are slightly different syntax. Also, there are no exclusions in Android. Also, what is very important is that if you change the allowed paths in Android, you need to ship a new version of your application, while on iOS this happens almost immediately, almost because still Apple needs to update the file, but it's quite fast. So this is both good and bad. Good because we like to ship things fast. POs are clapping. Let's get it out to users. But the problem is that you may end up in a situation where on the server you already have a path marked as accepted, and the user click on the link. Server says, it's good to open the app, but the app doesn't know what to do with this link. So you have to keep that in mind with your rollout process. So now let's jump to the Flutter implementation, and I prepared a simple demo using the GoRouter package. I use GoRouter because this is also mentioned in Flutter official docs in the section of navigation and deep linking. So I wanted to provide an example that people could use. But I think that after you get a grasp of it, then you can move to any navigation packet that you like. And you can use the so-called, I don't know if I'm just calling it like that or if there is an official name for that, built-in deep link support. So basically, if you add the Flutter deep linking enabled meta tag to Android manifest and a similar tag to info list on iOS, basically your app router is getting the deep links immediately. You don't need any additional code for this. So I created a simple app. I'm a food lover, so it will be evolving around recipes. And all you need to do is create a material app.router and pass it your router configuration. So in here, this is a very simple initialization. You define your initial location, and you can define some paths. So for example, my initial path is just a slash, and it will be resolved to a home page. And you can notice that it has a subroad inside of it that will be leading to a recipe screen. And in such a case, this syntax recipe slash ID, this means that I expect some kind of dynamic ID that is a path parameter, and you can just extract it from the state. And also there is another route that is just a profile, and this is not connected to home. So a thing that is worth noting that if you will navigate to slash recipe slash some ID, you will have in your navigation stack both the home screen and then the recipe screen. You are also able to extract query parameters with this setup. So I think the syntax may have changed in newer GoRouter configuration, so always check the docs, but it's as simple as that. But also there are some things that you have to keep in mind. For example, there is this option to define the concrete values that are accepted. So for example, not just some type of ID, but I only accept breakfast, dessert, or dinner. So now let's think what would happen if I would try to open lunch. So this would cause a path matching error, and this is the default error page that GoRouter is displaying. It's not very pretty, but thankfully they provide a very easy way to just give your custom builder. So yeah, my custom screen is also not great, but also not terrible, so I think it's enough. And also, one thing you have to keep in mind is that even if your route is matched, you also need to do some error handling on your own. For example, in this case, when I will be trying to open a recipe page of some ID that surely doesn't exist, then on my recipe screen, I also need to handle the error because I don't know what kind of recipe it is. We can also easily do redirects, and we can do that at the route level by just defining a route like here /home. For example, maybe our website has this URL, but in the app for us it's just our home with a simple slash. And also it is possible to do top-level redirects, which are often called guards in other navigation packages. For example, we want to prevent the logged-in users not logged-in users to see the profile, because first they need to log in. So we can just say, no, you shall not pass. You need to log in first. No profile for you. And fun thing is that I'm mostly focused on mobile because I wanted to show the native setup of Android and iOS. But with the code that I just showed you before, it works actually out of the box on web as well. So you can just click, and you can see that the URL is changing, and if you try to manually go, for example, to the profile page, it won't be possible. The user will be redirected to login, so no additional work. So this was pretty simple, and actually the deep linking is working, but I'm also a curious George, so I kept on digging on the URL structures, because the example I showed you, that was simple. I defined all the paths. I had full control over it. So I was checking, for example, Twitter and Instagram, and as you can see, they have this pattern that probably they have a list of defined paths, and then everything else that is after the domain and a slash, they assume it will be a username. Then if there is a status, then it will be your tweet. On Instagram, if there is a /p, it's a post. If it's a /reel, it's a reel. So this is straightforward. I think everyone can read the patterns easily. But then I checked Zara, And the first one is a product page, and the other one is like a landing page for women's shoes. And I was like, yeah, this is definitely more difficult. So let's check their Apple App Site Association file. So basically, a product page for Zara is something that has a P and 8 or 11 or 15 characters. And a landing page is something that has an L and some characters. So good luck implementing that with the setup that I showed you before with the Just Go router. But thankfully, there are some packages to handle deep linking, and the two most popular ones on Flutter are Unilinks and Uplinks. And actually, they are pretty similar. I will be talking about Uplinks, but only because Unilinks hasn't been updated since 2 years. That doesn't sound very good, but I know many apps that still use that successfully in production. So if you want to go for it, go for it. Uplinks, I think, also have support for desktop. And both have a very similar API. So basically what you need to do is check for an initial link on startup. So to check if the app was started with a link. And also subscribe to a stream of links so that you can handle links while the app is already running. And then you need to, do everything on your own with that link. So it's a bit much work, but hey, you also have a lot more control. So we start with getting rid of it. Unfortunately, we have to get the deep links on our own. And I created a simple deep links repository for that purpose, so they have a nice wrapper. And actually, I copied it from a project that was using Unilinks. And when I wanted to change it to uplinks, I just needed to change, like the get initial uplink and URI link stream, because the names were slightly different, but the purpose is the same. So basically, I have two things: ability to get the initial URI and also to get the stream of incoming links. And then I'm using a blog, because I like blogs, but feel free to use any other state management that you like. So first I check if there is an initial URI that started my app. If yes, I will handle it, which I will show you shortly. And then I also subscribe to incoming links, and I will also be handling them. So you can also implement on your own the redirects. You can do the route redirects even as simple as just defining a map of your redirects and then just check if you need to exchange the path. Then you can decide based on some of your conditions in the path what kind of deep link it is. So for example, here Zara probably has an if-else checking the number of characters after a P. And then while you are handling it, so in here I'm just creating some events, but actually the real handling depends on your needs. So for example, here for recipes, I'm extracting a path segment to get the recipe ID, and then I pass it on to my further, and I will have the recipe ID that I can handle on my recipe screen. And you can also do the so-called guards on your own. So for example, if the user is trying to access profile, you can check if they are logged in. If not, then you can navigate them to login. And then I just wrap my app with a deep link listener, and in here I check what kind of deep link I got, and I proceed with the navigation. So there are also some third-party solutions. And you may ask yourself, okay, but why? We already had a working solution. Deep links are working. Like, why would I need an external solution? And I mean, even more third party than Unilinks and Uplinks. So, for example, the most important thing is called deferred deep links. And this is a mechanism of when a user clicks on a link and they don't have your app installed, they are navigated to the App Store, they download the app, and they still get to that link that they initially clicked on. So this is widely used in advertisement. For example, recently an advertisement caught my eye, really. It said it's like a decorative stick of a cat shape. And I was like, wow, I just have to see what it looks like. So I'm going to download the app. So I clicked on the advertisement, downloaded the app. So a lot of pop-ups, like bad user experience. A lot of pop-ups and then nothing. And, they lost my interest. I mean, I went back to Facebook and I clicked on the link again, and this time the deep link worked. I was taken to the cat garden stick product, but they lost me. They lost me as a client. So this is why deferred deep links is especially important for advertising. And actually, you can't, or at least you can't achieve that easily without a third-party solution. Also, third parties are useful when you don't have a domain and you still don't want to use custom schemes. So they provide a mechanism for that. Also stuff like fallbacks. So for example, if users don't have your app installed, they can either be taken to the store or to your website or maybe to a completely different page. You can make your links shorter, which is also share friendly because nobody likes clicking on long suspicious links. And also it provides features like analytics and attribution trackings. So those are some solutions that provide those functionalities, for example, branch, adjust, or apps flyers, but they are paid solutions. I mean, they have some free tiers, but in general they are paid, and I would say they are also quite big and much connected to marketing stuff. And the truth is, they are not usually chosen by developers. Usually it's you work for a company and your marketing team says, hey, we need you to integrate adjust or branch or whatever we are using for other marketing purposes. So probably it will not be your call anyway. So there is a smaller and also developer-friendly solution, which is Firebase Dynamic Links. It's a Firebase service, it is free, and you can use your own domain or you can configure one of the domains that they offer you. You can also fall back to app stores or some specific URLs. It allows you to do the deferred deep link. You can generate the links dynamically. You can shorten them. You can define a nice social media preview. Sounds amazing, isn't it? Well, unfortunately, this year it was announced that Google is killing this service. So actually it will be working till August 25, 2025. So if your app uses Firebase Dynamic Links, then on Monday better talk to your product owner that you have an important task for the next 1.5 years. So until then, you still have time to use them. So actually, if you are doing just a small project for yourself or for college, then I think it's still okay to use it, but in production, not really. And what they recommend to use is to use just native deep link setup. But what about all the cool features that I mentioned? Well, they also said just use a third party like Adjust, AppsFlyer, Bitly, Branch, Kohava. But they just mention them. They don't say, okay, this one is the best. So basically we are left with nothing. But fortunately, the community is already acting. So, for example, recently Paweł Ryabov posted Flowlinks, which is a Firebase extension that is aiming to provide replacement to some of Firebase Dynamic Links features. And it's free. You get a dedicated Firebase hosting. You can customize the metadata so that your links have a nice social preview. You can also have dynamic links links, so you can decide where should they actually take the users to. Sadly, it doesn't offer deferred deep links, but the dashboard was created in Flutter, so I think it's worth mentioning that. And you can see on the dashboard you can do all the settings, and you will also have access to all the analytics in the future and also some integrations. And when it comes to deferred deep links, Jonas recently posted an article about his proposed simple solution, how to do the deferred deep links on your own. And he is using the native clipboards. And this is actually what most of the solutions we're using under the hood. So generally right now the problem with the deferred deep links is that users are taking care of their privacy more and more, and you need to get their permission to use their clipboard, so it provides not a very good user experience. So the whole topic is becoming more and more difficult. I really would not like to be a marketer right now, because honestly I don't know what they will be doing with the deferred deep links. But I would also like to say that nature abhors vacuum, so maybe this is your time to shine and provide an alternative to Firebase dynamic links. Surely there will be many people interested and maybe even willing to pay something for a smart solution. And after today's talk, I would like you to remember that deep linking is super important, not only for marketers, but also for your users, because you just make their life easier, and they will be more likely to share the content from your app with their friends and just use it. Keep in mind that we are doing mobile apps, but if we are using Flutter, you still need to do native setup for 2 platforms, and both has some troubles of their own. You don't need to own your own domain to use deep links. You can use custom schemes or use a third-party SDK to do that for you. And also keep in mind that a good URL structure saves you a lot of time. So not always we can influence that, but if you are in a position or your company is just starting and you can get some suggestions, then make sure that each URL has a clean structure, so that later when you get it, you can clearly define, is it a product page, is it a profile page, etc., etc. And also keep in mind that you need to handle errors at various levels. So thank you for your attention. Here is a QR code that has a very quick feedback form. So you need to do just one click, submit, and then you will be redirected to a page with all resources. Actually, this page is my GitHub, so you can also find it online, but please provide feedback. And everything is available. So if you have any questions, you can ask them now.